first things first. I haven't lost my mind. I'm just thinking of ways to occupy my mind, and I've had too much time alone, and I think I've started doing things that maybe I thought I let go of, things that I thought that I had moved on from, and I'll explain all this. I was in Beirut the first week of October last year, and the past 2 years of my life, I reconnected with Lebanon. I reconnected in a way on my terms. I spent 4 years away from Lebanon mourning. And somebody once wrote to me a very wise sentence: death has majesty. And the idea that it heals with time strikes me as unpersuasive. I don't think I can properly move on from what happened to my father. I know that it's been over 6 years since he was killed, and I know that 6 years ago, I was thinking about that moment, if not every minute, I mean almost every minute of the day. It consumed me to the point that I left. And I didn't set foot in Lebanon for years, for nearly 4 years. And by accident, when I was in Beirut in January 2018, I sort of just simply decided to start doing the tour. I wanted to help raise money for an internship in my father's name at the Grand Sarai, meant to be permanent, regardless of which prime minister occupies that seat. And I did. I raised a stipend for an intern, and really the thought was just I would do it once. I would do it one time, and just to relive that experience that I had stopped 4 years earlier. And I love giving the tour for many reasons. And for people that know me, for people that have known me for quite some time, I think it's pretty clear that this is my calling. I think I can do variations of it, and the podcast is sort of it's a sidestep away from it, but it all goes back to the same story, which is Beirut's story. And my father became a small part of that very long, complicated, tragic story. So I started giving the tour again in a way to honor him. And for those that have been on the tour, it is still a tribute to Samir Asir, and that will never change. But my father, being able to reflect on his life, in particular in Martyrs Square, where he's buried today, that was incredible. To be able to take hundreds and then eventually thousands of guests to just next to my father's tomb and talk about all that has happened in Martyrs Square and all that has happened to Beirut the last 100 years, and then far more immediately and more intimately what happened to me and my family and my father. So I should be in Beirut now. I should be giving the tour now. And I think I'm upset. I think I'm not in my element. And I know that I don't want to sound too selfish here. I don't want to sound selfish at all. I know that too many people on this planet feel isolated right now and feel sad for many reasons, and social distancing, and just the fact that you can't approach your friends, let alone your family. It's just it's a difficult time. And the last few episodes of the podcast, I've been trying to touch on that sort of that journey from, having a crazy scene in Beirut to having absolute silence. And in my own case, in New York, the hardest hit city when it comes to COVID-19. So that's a very long way of saying that the last 3 months, and then in particular the last month, has been quite isolating. So a lot of reflection, a lot of solitude, a lot of time alone. And I've kept a lot of physical memories of my father with me, and wherever I go, I take them with me. If they're not in my suitcase, they're sort of stored somewhere, and I know where they are all the time. And if you just permit me, one of them is a bow tie, and one day I will share stories that I wrote about my father, and I'll get something published one day. And one of those stories is about this bow tie, and he gave it to me 2 days before he died. I think he had worn it in the late 1970s as a student in Austin, Texas, and if memory serves me right, he was flirting with the idea of bringing back the bow tie to the Lebanese political scene, which I thought was a bit eccentric. He wanted to start wearing a bow tie again, and then go on TV and talk about defense strategy and, international relations, and sort of have the host and the audience just sort of zeroing in on a eccentric bow tie. So anyway, I kept this with me. It's been with me ever since, and I'm not cool enough to wear a bow tie, so instead I just hold on to it. The second thing is a beret that he used to wear all the time, and this was his way of going, sort of his camouflaging himself, whether on the Corniche or his preferred place, AUB campus. Sort of he would just put this thing on and assume that no one would recognize him. Of course, everyone would recognize him, but it didn't matter. He still was certain that this would hide him and hide his identity. He also had this, I think, safari hat that didn't get him far. I think he tried this once or twice. It was pretty embarrassing. And a far less sophisticated beret. Still, that was his preferred style. And I think jokingly he thought that he would go he would hide himself this way. But deep down, I think he just liked wearing these things. And any excuse to put them on, he'd put them on. And he looked good in them. I'm lucky. There are some photos I took of us walking on the Corniche together. And all those photos have a beret. So there are many other things I've kept with me, and I'm not going to go too deep into this, other than just saying that there's physical relics that I've held on to. And the last few days, I'll share something intimate here. It was very difficult for me to start talking about what happened to my father. The first few weeks and few months after it happened, I was able to pretend like this was just a TV show, and I could just sort of write it out. And, it was all cameras, it was all microphones, and it was just endless acting. And I acted my way through the whole thing, and I didn't let myself collapse. And I think I kept myself together enough so that when I left, one sad moment, and it's just everything came out. And I wasn't able to put it back in properly. And then it took me time to actually really think about what happened and really talk about it comfortably, at least in public. it actually took years. It was hard for me to even engage in certain topics without letting it drive me crazy. And these are silly examples, but at the time they really mattered. I think the word Hezbollah terrified me. I was not afraid of Hezbollah, and I'm not afraid of Hezbollah. But I think what happened to my father shook me to my core, and that I was just waiting for anyone, when talking about that group, any sort of naive defense of that group's weapons and what they're able to do. I think I'd break down. And I avoided those situations as much as I could. Now, I was in Scotland for about 4 years, so there aren't many people talking about Hezbollah in the Highlands of Scotland or in the pubs of Edinburgh, and it's just not a place where you engage Middle East issues, which was good. I think it kind of gave me a way to sort of shield myself from it. But it was difficult to just be able to speak my mind openly about certain things without letting it break me inside repeatedly. It was almost like a repeated injury whenever that issue would come up. And that situation, I think, persisted even until I returned and started giving the tour, even after I wrote a eulogy for my father and I shared it repeatedly in Martyrs Square. I don't think I was able to really engage the issue. Even when I started doing this podcast, I don't think I could easily talk about Lebanese politics per se without being nervous. It just kept reminding me about what happened, and it kept reminding me of the assassination. Early October last year, I was in Beirut. I had been going back and forth between New York and Beirut, trying to sort of dance between two countries and two cities. And I was in Lebanon only to give the tour in early October, and I was meant to be there just for a few weeks and fly out. And I'm really committed to this tour, and I don't want to just let it go. It's my strength. I'm good at it, and I know people enjoy it, and I know that it means something, and that's important. It has purpose, and I need that. And out of nowhere, October 17, things changed. And it's one of those, I think it was an occasion where I actually was happy that I wasn't able to give the tour, because I knew that what was happening was extremely important, and that, yes, we would need to shut the city down, and we would need to move on, and we would need to rebuild the country. And I say this in full confidence. I'm sure my father would have been very proud of that moment. So I just naturally, I think it just took a day or two. I had my microphones with me. I just started doing this podcast earlier in the year. I decided to focus in on what was happening and turn the podcast into almost a collective memory, if you will, a document of as many voices as possible, reflecting on the moment, from politicians to musicians to urban planners, architects, filmmakers, photographers, protesters, economists. I mean, any type of field that kind of was part of the moment. Graffiti artists, painters, and all sort of zeroing in on the need to move Lebanon out of its civil war era. Not the 15 years that we always talk about, not 1975 to 1990, the 45 years. 1975 until today. An independent, sovereign, and sensible country that does not chase its citizens away. And I really, really, really I believed, and I still do, that there's no going back to October 16. But the weeks after, feeding in until late November, I felt myself able to finally discuss the issues that I was not able to properly discuss. And certain words that I was reluctant to use, I could use. And people that I wanted to criticize, I could openly criticize. And just challenge authority and comfortably challenge it. I thought this was my own personal rebirth that I needed. And I think it's changed me forever in that sense, that now I in a sense was able to move on, in a way, a small way. I could channel that rage and anger and pain and sadness and all the emotions that come with it into something productive. And I personally see this podcast as part of that, able to let it out and engage. Of course, not in a confrontational way, and I'm not putting anyone against the wall. It's the opposite. I just want to celebrate what the country means to all of us, and in particular Beirut, but not just Beirut, and any issues that kind of still impact the country. So I felt very good, and I was able to, and while recording episodes daily and interviewing people daily, and co-host Elia, who was practically living in Martyrs Square, she was able to record episodes daily. We grinded out. We just kept releasing episode after episode after episode. And suddenly we noticed tens of thousands of listeners tuning in, and it was a needed sort of boost for this podcast to make it make it more than just sort of me engaging in guests and their stories. I wanted to have a slightly larger purpose, and I think it did. It documented that moment, and every episode that I'm still releasing sort of ties in to those months of protests. And I know that once COVID-19 passes, it won't be long before people go back to the streets and their demands are not met. And even if they're not in the streets now, it's still, people did not go packing up thinking they did it. On the contrary, there's a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. And I think that work will begin after COVID-19 passes. And aside from sort of spending a lot of time alone and sort of holding on to these physical relics of my father, and thinking about him all the time these days in a healthier way, I think. Just sort of imagining conversations with him about issues he probably would have never known about, including COVID-19 and Dr. Fauci in the States, and Trump more concerned about his ratings during COVID-19 than The Bachelor's series finale. I mean, these are very, very, very strange times. and this is my second home, the States, and it is sort of this country is going through its own issues, very different but serious issues, and I just imagine what it would be like to talk with him about these things. So a few days ago, I did something that I sometimes do. I just sort of dove deep into Google search and just sort of wandered around the endless articles that reference him, or he was sort of featured in, and this is going back to the 90s, and I mean, there's just a lot of stuff you can zigzag your way through. And I knew my father had a blog, and I mean, I think more people know that his Twitter account, the last words, so to speak, were posted on his Twitter account, and they're still there. It's just minutes before the car bombing. But the blog, I never really spent too much time looking at, and I think it was a mistake, because I just never noticed that he spent a lot of time on it, and it goes back to 2012. So there's about a year or so. I hope I got that right. Is it 2012? It is exactly a year and a half, June of 2012 until September 2013. So there's a lot of stuff here. And it kind of just, it's a snapshot of his last year and what it was like trying to stay hopeful and trying to also point the finger in its sort of honing in on serious structural problems in Lebanon and looking for a way out. And of course, I mean, it's not that long ago, but it's also, these are the Obama years, and the Syrian war, it's at its peak. And I mean, there's a lot of Syria in the postings, but also there's a lot of Lebanese issues, and some of these were Daily Star articles about the offshore gas, and there's some economics in here, and then there's just sort of the occasional light posting that is a sort of a heavier issue that I think my father was trying to maybe make a little more appealing. And I stumbled across one piece that I remember him mentioning to me, and I didn't know what he was doing with it, and I completely forgot about it. I didn't know it was here. And I was making fun of him. We were out for dinner, and he kept referencing the frog in the kettle and the boiling water thing, and I was like, this is like, it's overdone. You can do better than that and think about a different way. He's like, no, there's no other way to describe what I want to describe. And I would just sort of tease him all the time about what I thought, and this I could maybe get away with it because I was his son. I could say this, that I thought he was a bit cheesy at times, but it served its purpose. It definitely was a far more appealing way of describing an issue that I could ever do. And I noticed that the final product is in the blog, and I just never picked up on this. So I'll probably do this from time to time, especially now with COVID-19, and I'm leaning more on video these days. I need to at least experience some virtual interaction. There's always going to be an audio component that will never change. I will always focus on the audio episodes, and there will be some standalone audio episodes coming out as well. But I'm exploring the video terrain as well, and I like it. I like learning from a very amateur sort of from the ground up. I'm trying my best to just sort of get this thing going in different ways. So, if you'll permit, I would like to read, and it's a post from Wednesday, 27 June 2012. And the title is, "But Can the Frog Still Jump Out?" I can still recall how fascinated I was when my middle school science teacher told us about the boiling frog phenomenon. Apparently, as some experiments had shown, if you put a frog in a pot of water and let the temperature rise very slowly. The frog's reflexes, which are geared to respond to sudden environmental changes, will not react to the gradual heating of the water. By the time the temperature reaches a fatally high level, the frog is incapable of jumping out, even if it wanted to. In fact, some experimenters claim that frogs subjected to such experiments show signs of actually enjoying the deadly increase in warmth, as long as it is very gradual. That's what came to my mind as I watched the smiling faces of happy strollers along the new elegant boardwalk of Beirut's beachfront. No one can blame those young men and women for looking happy, or for being oblivious to the dangerously gradual degradation which their country is experiencing. It is those who are in position to turn off the switch before it is too late who deserve the blame. Palliatives and placebos will not do anymore. A new round of national dialogue once every few weeks will be just that, if there is no will to actually do what it takes to reverse the dangerous slide downward. It would not be an easy climb up even in the best of circumstances, and the required effort is certainly a collective and not a partisan one. But without a genuine reassessment by our Hezbollah partners of the manner in which the Lebanese theater is used in the pursuit of their and their allies' strategic regional and ideological goals, I am afraid a successful climb up would be impossible. For years, some of us have been warning that the existence of a heavily armed organization outside the authority and control of the state, governed by a theological party, and allied, military and ideologically, with outside regional powers, presents dangers to the country that far outweigh any deterrence value to Lebanon of its arsenal. In addition to being incompatible with the Constitution and with any conceivable notion of state sovereignty, the current status of Hezbollah's weapons weakens the Lebanese state, which is the binding cornerstone of our diverse society, sharpens the already grinding structural faultiness among Lebanon's various constituent religious communities, erodes the state's ability to preserve law and order, and prevent the alarming spread of illegal weapons throughout the country, puts the country at risk of being part of other regional wars and conflicts that are heating up, and makes it impossible to reverse the deterioration in Lebanon's public administration, infrastructure, and investment climate. Experience has shown that all those fears were well placed. Obviously, the national downward slide did not start with Hezbollah. Some would argue that it actually started more than 4 decades ago, when another attempt was made to reach a coexistence arrangement between the state's legitimate armed authority and another one outside it. Failure was inevitable, and the cost to all was enormous. Of course, history will not repeat itself because there will be no attempt to try to change the current state of affairs by force. It would be foolish to even consider it. However, the cost to the country is still enormous and rising. It makes little difference that, now, it is a Lebanese, quote, resistance organization instead of a non-Lebanese, quote, liberation organization. Lebanon is paying a high price, and national erosion is getting deeper. Hezbollah needs to realize this and join hands with all others and agree on a roadmap to save the country from the abyss. A roadmap with a clear target, one which is grounded in the country's unity, its constitution, and the exclusive sovereignty and authority of the state. Nothing short of that will do. It is that critical. Is it too late for the frog to jump out of the pot? I don't believe so. But we are certainly in danger zone, and the clock continues to tick ominously, belying the smiles on the happy faces along Beirut's new elegant boardwalk. It feels good to actually to find this. Sort of feel a little bad for making fun of him when he was using the analogy, but I know that he knew how to deliver his message, and I think he had a very, very, very persuasive way of explaining big problems, and very creative ways of trying to get out of those problems. So I'll do this from time to time. And I just want to wrap up by saying that, well, I really wish that he was here. And I miss this man. I miss this man so much. A few very, very, very good friends helped me find my way out of that moment, and these are close friends. I will always, I'll never find the right way of telling them thank you for what they did. But without them, I don't think I would have managed my way. So, but that said, and all that aside, I really wish he was here, and I really wish I could talk to him about many things. Anyway, thank you.